Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good day. Yes, I was already wondering.
Hello, Pelayo.
Good morning. How everybody is doing?
We're doing just fine. You must be busy like crazy.
Well, this is the last day, so we only have 2 sessions left. But last week, pretty intense. But really productive and lots of great sessions. So I'm really happy to be here today.
What a nice background, Madame Newman.
I finally managed to get the right link, so I'm on.
But it just only now started, so don't worry.
Okay, good. You mean you've actually started?
Of course, we're talking to the entire, no.
We will be starting at 9 o'clock. I will be connecting it to the YouTube channel, which will take approximately 20 seconds or so. So just give me a little bit of time before we start the workshop. I'll keep you informed of everything. You all can share screens, so feel free to share any materials that you have. And if anybody wants to be named a co-host, so they have a little bit of privileges in terms of muting any participants or any other things that may come up, I can do that right now. And we'll have the chat open and the Q&A open. The Q&A, the questions that come in won't be public unless you answer them. And you can always dismiss them in case they are not relevant or you think there was no time to answer. Sometimes the session gets very busy and there's no time to answer questions, so it will depend on your moderation.
Can I ask a question? Hilary, you're moderating this, right? I'm more interested in answering questions, I think, and having a debate than I am in having a long preamble. So my preamble is going to be pretty short.
Okay, you will have 2 questions in our session, and those 2 questions will appear on the screen. I will bundle them so that we maximize on the amount of time that we have, and the 3 speakers will have the opportunity to answer as they see fit, and then we see if we have questions indeed from the floor.
Okay.
Does that work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sorry, can I just test my mic? I had some technical problems, so just to make sure that you can hear me.
Yes, of course. I think we're hearing you correctly. If anybody wants to test the share screen so they feel more confident with it, please go ahead. This is the time.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Harry.
So thank you. I would like to try the screen share. Now I'm ready.
Please go ahead.
But it is on mute. Huh?
Okay. Yeah.
I know.
We would suggest that we have a slide in the beginning. You have to put your thumb there.
Oh, are you in the same room?
Yes, we are actually in the same room in the office in Paris. So that's why, but so Hilary would be speaking and moderating, and thanks again to everyone who agreed to be the panelist here. I sent you last week some slides that are just the program and showing the questions for the panelists. I don't know if Florence here already, so the first panel would be moderated by Hilary, the second by Florencia from SDSN, and just so you know, you can share them yourselves if you want the link as well, or I will be sharing it, and I'm just gonna try so we know how it looks like and that it works as well. And then as for the Q&A, I don't know, I might try and answer them meanwhile, and Meredith or anyone else, please feel free to do so. Thanks.
Isabel, your mic is a little bit wavy. I don't know if it's because you're in the same room with somebody else. Sometimes that happens. Do you have any other mic, or maybe you're talking?
I won't be speaking in the session, so it will be Hilary just speaking and moderating, and just us in the background there. So can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, I just need to make it big then. Okay, good. So yeah, just so you know that we have a small program and slides, but if I share them and someone else is speaking, who will the participants see?
They will see the screen and the person who's speaking at the same time.
Okay. So it will not be my video, but for instance, if Hilary is speaking, it will be Hilary and
Correct.
myself.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And if I end my video now, it should only be this. How does it look like on your end? Could you open it? Yes.
Yep.
Okay, good. Just to test that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry,
Thank
can
you.
you just make it clear to me? I'm not 100% sure. How long do we have for the first panel altogether before you move on to the second moderator and the second panel? Hello?
This question is for whom?
I'm gonna mute myself again, and we will be speaking on Hilary's end.
I suppose it's to whoever's organizing this session.
That would be us.
So that would depend according on the program that you have planned, but we will have for this session in the mornings, an hour and a half until 10:30. So all the content that you have to present would be during that hour and a half.
Just to reply to Joanna, how we are going to organize the session, if you could.
Stakeholder.
Joanna, so the session, if you want me to respond to that question, because I didn't hear it, I was out. So the session is divided into first setting the stage. That will be a few minutes so that we can open and we can keep the maximum time for the two parts where there will be a first part, no one fits all, methods to approach SDGs in education. That's where Chandrika Bahadur, welcome. You're on the screen as well now, Director of the SDG Academy of the UN SDSN. And you will be speaking, Joanna, and then Muneo Kaigo is to speak. He's from Tsukuba University and should be on the screen in a few minutes as well. For that part, we have 20 minutes, so it goes by very fast. We have 2 questions. And so that's why the 2 questions will appear on the screen one after the other, and you've seen the questions. So they are, how can we translate the SDGs? And the other one is, what and how do we teach about the SDGs? So you pick whichever part you wish. Then, hello, Muneo. Very nice to welcome you. Very good. We can't hear you because you're muted.
Sorry about that.
Very welcome. By University, and he will be speaking in our session together with Chandrika Bahadur and Joanna Newman. And we were just talking briefly, Muneo, about the sequencing of the sessions. So on the screen, you already also have the 3 organizers of the session. The SDG Academy, and that is where Chandrika Bahadur comes in. ICAE, the International Council of Adult Education, and then the triumvirate between AUF, IAU, and ACU. And so that first part will be about no one fits all and the method to approach the SDG in education. There will be a little moderated discussion. Hopefully there will be some questions, but we will see. And otherwise, I will hand over to Florencia Librizzi for the second part to touch on multi-stakeholder approaches and future perspectives, where we have 3 speakers moderated against a little discussion opportunity. And then we go to the conclusions, and Katarina, you will have the very difficult task of wrapping up on
summarizing everything.
Yeah.
Okay, so depending on the time, from 3 till 15 minutes.
Yes, well, it would be nice to have a little bit of your insight, because you did that marvelously well last year at HLPF 2019 as well. And so and that's why we're very happy that you could take on that role, because it would be really nice. You have 15 minutes, and we will moderate it in such a way so that we have sufficient
But in case, you know, we are like in times and behind the schedule, so I'll be flexible.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. So it's a marvelous opportunity to connect these three groups that actually offer the opportunity to discuss and debate this very topic. We know that at the same time, it's a pity as well that we do this online and not face to face, because last year we had the opportunity afterwards to have lots of debates and discussions. This time that part will be a bit different. So let's cross fingers and have time to meet next year.
Hello.
Who is speaking?
I
It's
think that's
Carol.
Carol, yeah.
We can't see you.
My internet is very poor. So
Oh, better maybe then switch off the camera, yeah?
But we will all switch off our
turn
cameras
off
when
the-
you will be speaking. So it should be okay.
Thank you. See you later.
Very good to have more participants on your side as well.
Yeah.
We hear many nice voices.
Thank you.
Yeah. Florencia is coming in soon. Do you know?
She should be. I know she was on another call. So Meredith, can you just check and see if that other meeting's getting over? She's, I think, just literally moving over from
one to the next.
Another event. Yes.
Ah. And Sir Hilary Beckalus from University of the West Indies is also to come in. Hi, Ricarda.
Hello,
we have
everybody.
3 minutes before we go out. Do we have all the, I think we have a couple panelists missing still?
One or
okay.
two. Actually, we have one moderator, Florencia Librizzi, but she should be coming in since she's moving in from another meeting. And then there's Sir Hilary Beckalus, who's the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, and I hope he can make it, because he will be...
Can you give a sense of how the Q&A will be handled? Are the questions coming to you? Will we be seeing the questions? Who's deciding if the audience questions? Who's going to be picking them? And
I will take them from the Q&A, and I will announce that that is the space in which people can ask questions, because usually they, the participants do also have questions in the conversation part of Zoom, which is less easy to then follow. Sir Hilary Beckalus is also with us, and Florencia as well.
Good morning.
Very nice.
So in 1 minute, I'll be going live for the participants to be entering, who will be slowly getting into the room for about like a minute or two. And at the same time, I'll be broadcasting in YouTube, which also takes around like 30 seconds or so. I'll let you know whenever we are completely live with all the participants, and I'll welcome you to start the workshop.
Thank you. Harris, thank you as well.
Not a problem. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for your strong support.
Absolutely.
Much
Now that we're on
appreciated.
session 9, where Pelayo and I are old pros at it. The first few we were a bit nervous, but now the technology is our friend at this point.
So we continue for an extra week.
Yeah. Why not? Yeah. As long as you're willing to host them.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the difficult part.
Yes.
Great. I'm going to start broadcasting to start the participants coming in. And we're currently live in YouTube. Please welcome to start the workshop. Enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. We're very pleased that already the numbers are moving up. We're close to 200 participants. Maybe we wait for just 1 or 2 extra seconds just to allow for people to enter the meeting room. I'll go to the first one, please. So dear participants, thank you very much for joining this important session today. We wanted to give the other participants just a few more seconds to enter the meeting room. So please do not, 5 seconds from now, we see that many are entering the conversation already. Very good to see that people are coming in from all parts of the world already. So I believe we can just start because even though 1.5 hours seem long, it is short. My name is Hilary van 't Land. I am the Secretary General of the International Association of Universities and extremely pleased to welcome you all to this very important session on teaching, learning, integrating the SDGs at universities and beyond. So it is to link to the decade of action, definitely. That is where we want to go. So today, I'm very pleased to welcome to the table our first very interesting session partners. The session partners are the SDG Academy, the International Council for Adult Education, and the International Association of Universities, together with l'Agence Universitaire de la Francophonie, and the Association of Commonwealth Universities. All three organizations, or not three now, we are 5. We're very pleased to have been involved, and especially in fostering the important role of higher education and education at large for sustainable development in education for many years. And we work with many global partners, as you will see all along throughout this session. To start, the SDG Academy is the flagship online education platform of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network that is supporting the UN movement. It has been created to curate for the available educational content on the SDGs. Very important, especially in this important period that we go through, where there is a real need for online support for education that is so much needed. The ICAE focuses on adult formation outside an institutional context and opens up exclusively, opens up to inclusive and not exclusive lifelong learning opportunities. Then the partnership that you also see on the screen between the Association of Commonwealth Universities, the Agence Universitaire de la Francophonie, and the International Association of Universities came together and signed a memorandum of understanding just last Friday to accelerate the engagement of higher education in Agenda 2030, as the associations together represent more than 2,000 higher education institutions from around the world. We share a strong commitment and advocate for a whole of institution approach to sustainable development. But the 3 partners really are complementary, and that is why we're so very pleased to be here together today and to have the opportunity to discuss first the way in which the different methods and approaches to the SDGs in education do matter, because they're so different, because no one size fits all. We're all offering the opportunity to engage at different levels. The second section will be on multi-stakeholder approaches and future perspectives. because we strongly are committed to international cooperation and multi-stakeholder cooperation as well, as we believe that the global goals call for concerted efforts all around the world, no matter where and no matter how, and as long as education for sustainable development is advanced. And so we're different organizations working together this year again. We did this last year as well at the HLPF 2019. Again this year, HLPF 2020, and we're very, very pleased to welcome the speakers that we have at the table. So in this first session on No One Fits All and the methods, the different methods that are being applied to engage at education levels with the SDGs, we're very pleased to welcome three esteemed speakers. First, Chandrika Bahadur, who's the director of the SDG Academy and at the UN SDSN, welcome. Then Joanna Newman, who is the Secretary General of the Association of Commonwealth Universities. And then Muneo Kaigo, who is from the University of Tsukuba in Japan. So three different points of views, more associated with the UN, an association with a very international and what universities actually are doing when it comes to translating the engagement into practice at universities. There are two questions that I would like to ask our esteemed speakers. And the two questions are the following. How can we translate the SDGs efficiently into universities and learning institutions, teaching, learning, and research practices and strategies? A big question. The second question is to ask you if you could expand on what and how do we teach about the SDGs, and how and what do we undertake when it comes to international research to engage with the SDGs to have a long-term positive effect on sustainable development, on sustainability at large, society. And I would like to give the floor to Chandrika Bahadur to open the debate. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Hilary. Can you hear me? Is it clear? Okay, great. Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the participants, and thank you for joining today. And a particular thank you to Hilary and the team for inviting us and for giving us the chance to partner with you. I want to start with, these are two great questions, Hilary, and I think I want to start by first mentioning a caveat. And the caveat is this: when we talk about the issues that the SDGs encompass, universities and institutions of higher learning have been teaching these issues for a long time. So schools of public health teach about pandemics, and they teach about communicable diseases. Schools of environment and forestry teach about climate change and about biodiversity loss. So in that sense, the issues that the SDGs bring about are not necessarily new. What is new and what is different and what is difficult is that the purpose of higher education institutions has been to enable students to develop expertise in a particular topic, to become masters, literally, of a particular area of study, a particular subject. Now, there's an immediate tension when you consider that objective with Agenda 2030 and with the range of issues that the SDGs encapsulate, because one of the fundamental principles of the Sustainable Development Goals is that they are not pick and choose goals. They are a collective, and they're a collective for a reason. So the first challenge of translation, if you will, is how does one marry this objective of being able to get students to allow them to have the time and the energy and the focus to really delve into a particular subject of their choice, while at the same time making sure that we do not lose the understanding of the full breadth of issues that the Sustainable Development Goals capture. And that leads to questions of interdisciplinarity, it leads to questions of systems thinking, and all of these words are used a lot in the context of teaching the SDGs. But fundamentally, this is both a challenge of time. It is also a challenge of pedagogy. So that's the first challenge I want to put out there. The second challenge I want to put out there is the fact that there's a difference between teaching topics that are related to the SDGs and teaching about the SDGs themselves. And here's the difference. The Sustainable Development Goals are time-bound, ambitious, outcome targets. So any kind of attempt at teaching about the goals necessarily means shifting from pure theory and abstract thinking to really thinking about application and implementation. How are the goals going to be achieved? Hilary, you talked about the decade of action. There are 10 years from now till 2030. Already we have seen a massive global scale unforeseen event that has disrupted any prior plans or pathways towards achieving the goals. What happens from now on? These are questions that deal with issues of finance. Where is the money going to come from? How does the money flow in the public sector? How does the money flow in the private sector? What are investments that need to be prioritized? There are questions around governance, around what are the systems of governance that are most aligned with what combination of public and private investments to allow countries to enable themselves to reach the goals. There are issues of implementation barriers. What has worked? What has not worked? How implementation is carried out? So that's the second set of questions. And there are several institutions of higher education that are professional schools. And so their goal is to prepare students to build a profession on some of these topics, but not all of them are. So this combination of theory and abstract thinking and pure knowledge, and then the link of that to practice and application is a second challenge, which has to then infuse any kind of translation effort that we embark upon. The third challenge I want to talk about is the fact that unlike a lot of fields of study, sustainable development is both an old field as well as a very new field. And what I mean by that is that these issues around sustainable development have been around for a long time. Yet the manner in which they are presenting themselves today is both new and it's dynamic. Look at the countries of Europe and North America. They had several decades where issues related to global warming were not front and center, were not existential threats in the way that they are today. Today, if you look at countries that are now striving for economic prosperity, they're having to fight poverty, they're having to deal with global pandemics, they're having to consider the fact that they're living in a world where carbon dioxide crossed 400 parts per million in 2014, and having to tackle all of these issues at the same time. So what's changing also is the knowledge base that we have, the evidence that we have. And again, this means a shift from thinking about knowledge as an existing good that faculty and schools can draw on, to really thinking about what is the latest, how does it work, what is the new things that we've learned even in the last few months, let alone the last few years, and how does that translate. So these are the three big, and these are big challenges, and it's not easy for institutions to either pivot quickly or to actually be able to address all of them adequately. So that's the problem definition. Now the question is, how does one do it? The proposal that I think we have made consistently based on the work that we've done at the Academy is that the only way to do a pivot this quickly is actually to use technology in a very, very smart and a differentiated manner. And I want to talk a little bit about what I mean by that. We have, sorry, 1 minute, yes, that's all I need. So we know that we have the world, higher education institutions have pivoted to technology very quickly over the last few months, but that's for a different reason. What we have seen is that the way to deal with these three challenges, two different pedagogical imperatives. One is the imperative of knowledge acquisition, and the other is the imperative of knowledge application. And the first, we believe, can be done quite efficiently through technology. We've seen this. We've seen a lot of materials available online. We've seen students are learning at their own pace. And that's really the promise and the potential of technology that allows you to take a lot of time away from what was otherwise done in a classroom setting to be done outside the classroom. The other part, which is knowledge application, is something that actually requires more, not less, of time between students and faculty to take that knowledge and then to think about interpretation, to think about application, to think about relevance, and to really sift through what's available to make sense of what is a very complex and a very challenging agenda. What we need is more face-to-face, or in today's context, more Zoom-to-Zoom interaction between faculty and students, and not less. And I think if institutions deploy technology smartly, selectively, but also consistently, we will be able to translate the SDGs very effectively in a higher education context. Let me stop there. Hilge, you're on mute, I think.
Thank you very much. This is very good because you identified many of the challenges that we can react to also in the two next presentations. So I would like to give the floor right away to Joanna Newman, the Secretary General of the Association of Commonwealth Universities. The floor is yours, Joanna, and you have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Hilary, and thank you very much, Chandrika, for a really challenging opening to our session, which was wonderful to hear. I think I'm just going to start by saying that the Association of Commonwealth Universities has over 530 members spread across Commonwealth countries, but 66% are in low and middle income countries. And it's worth remembering that the reason that the ACU is here today and is working with IAU and AUF is because we believe that higher education is central to finding solutions to all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And that's on the one side. On the other side, it's a paradox because we also believe that universities have been contributing towards global challenges when there were Millennium Development Goals, and higher education was not included until 2015 in the Sustainable Development Goals. So you have, we have a firm belief that to build up a fairer, juster and more equitable society, higher education has to be part of the conversation, which means that we have to encourage governments and the United Nations to get behind building up capacity for higher education to exist across the world and to be secure grade education. And that it's an essential link so that you don't get good primary education, you don't get good pedagogy, you don't get a good teacher education, you don't get good applied research or blue sky research or anything that will actually go towards solving any of these goals without the contribution of higher education, and not least its contribution to creating globally aware citizens who are able to hear points of view that differ from their own, meet people who differ from their own backgrounds and contexts and languages, and therefore create a more humane world through the kind of education that they receive. So that's one thing. And so I would say that universities have been doing it anyway. However, I would also say that in some ways the Sustainable Development Goals, when they were formed in 2015, their recognition of the role of higher education has been a really good rallying cry for universities to use the concept of the SDGs to wrap around the work that they do. Now, makes, but they're also doing that to galvanize their communities, to galvanize their students, their professional service staff, and their academics, to make an effort to feel agents, if you like, to feel active agents in solving real world problems. And they do that in a number of different ways, because as Hilary said at the very beginning of this, one size certainly would not fit all. And I think there is a slight danger in the new rankings for universities that now include reference to the SDGs, that creates a race to the top or a race to the bottom, where you actually you are privileging those very universities that have the capacity, the research offices to collect the data, and you are ignoring the role that universities might make in places where they're mainly teaching focused, or they're mainly specializing in reaching out to the furthest away, and they're not going to be able to show the kind of extraordinarily valuable work they're whereby you can create solutions to the Sustainable Development Goals. So the principles, I think, for where SDGs are successfully engaged or embedded into a university campus are very varied and differ according to the institution, but there are some common principles, I think. One is the institutional commitment from the leadership to make sure that they are sort of they're known. For example, Newcastle University has a SDG committee that reports into the executive board, but there are many ways of doing this. I think mapping what the institution is already doing. I think, Chandra, you mentioned various different departments will all be doing their own thing. And it's partly about presenting it in a way that demonstrates its contribution, but it's also about challenging those faculties, challenging those voluntary activities, challenging the student bodies to think about how actually what they're doing really does contribute and that they do have agency in that. There's also a bold and ethical innovation culture that can be used, hackathons, the internationalization of students working together to solve problems. I've seen some wonderful examples of that. I've also seen how NUS in Singapore, for example, has created extracurricular content, and they actually reduced the number of hours on formal curricular study to encourage students to go off and do their own work that would count towards the SDGs, because they thought it was so important, because it also creates, as a byproduct, an institution, an entrepreneurial framework. But then there's also the fact that universities are villages or towns or cities of their own, and therefore they have a responsibility, a civic responsibility of their own footprint. So examining carbon footprint, for example, examining how to become carbon neutral, how to disinvest from fossil fuels, how to ensure that you aren't just talking the talk, but that you do have a really important, you do have a widening participation strategy for students, so that you're not just getting the most elite. I see that my time is coming up. And then finally, as a principle, interdisciplinarity in teaching and research, making sure that those links are made between the arts, social sciences and hard sciences. So it's not just seen that only hard sciences are going to actually solve the problems of the global challenges. You can't do it if you don't also have understanding humankind as part of that approach, and that involves the arts and history, English, languages, and other subject areas. And I just want to finally finish on the second question. I'm not going to be able to talk about it, we don't have enough time, but the question about how to undertake research and engage with the SDGs with sustainability. The question is about equity. How do you embed equitable partnerships, equitable research into a world which has exposed 6% across the world, 8% in many sub-Saharan African countries. There are huge inequalities that have just been exposed through COVID, not least the digital divide. So on the one hand, our universities have been incredibly innovative in being able to use technology, and on the other hand, half the universities in our network don't have enough data to be able to do so. So you have to also tackle inequality if you want to be able to embed international collaboration and research and teaching into an SDG framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A very rich presentation indeed, and I'm just only sorry that to have to cut you off, both of you, but I would like to give the floor now to Muneo Kaigo and also give an example from a university specifically. And we will hear later on from Sir Hilary Beckalus from a university as well. So that's that part, but we have all the other aspects of teaching and learning. And you will see in the chat questions are coming up that are really calling for strong and clear examples from the university sector. So the floor is yours, Muneo, please.
Okay, how many minutes do I have?
You have 7.
Okay, thank you. All right, esteemed colleagues, greetings. Very glad to be here. Hilary, thank you. As I thought about the questions that you sent me, the first question, and I've been following a lot of the talks that have been going on, and I'm going to echo some of the opinions that were given by the colleagues for in regards to question 1. In the opening session, if you remember, Fernando Ramos mentioned that we are facing the opportunity to create a renaissance of education and maybe to accelerate the SDGs to overcome COVID-19 may be idealistic, but maybe the only solution. The Renaissance is very difficult. Fernando had a lot of ideas of leadership and long-term visions. And in your session, Hilary, your session with Jeff Sachs, mentioned in your session that we need to have, well, I think that we need to have the courage to accept breaking the disciplines. So interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary is just too weak. And we need to reorganize research groups into these teams that are encouraged to spearhead initiatives regarding SDGs. For example, in my institute has been reformulating this, and we're now beginning to concentrate efforts in how to create teams on building teams in bringing other people into our efforts. For example, our main effort is inequality, and we're trying to figure out a way on how to, like, bring in different teams, different fields on how to create this. Now, this is actually very difficult because, as you know, we're all very comfortable in our disciplines. So this creates a sort of like a very bitter turf wars, and these are ongoing right now. Unfortunately, in Japan as well, humanities has been downsized, and depending how things go, it may become even more sour. So as you know, a lot of engineering and all these schools have been more emphasized in Japan. However, these are sort of issues that can be discussed another time. Now, for question number 2, how can we teach the SDGs? Now, as for example, in our university, we have life sciences, we have a microbiology research center, we have a lot of environmental sciences, and a lot of bachelor programs sort of concentrating on global issues. Now, all of these are wonderful. Hidehiro Yamamoto has organized an SDG seminar with a focus on inequality, and we've had visitors from other universities like the University of Tokyo and also Okayama University from the southwest of Japan. And I would like to share an example that came up at this session where students at Okayama thought about what they can do for the SDGs. So this is different from, like, commanding how to, like, teach about the SDGs. So it's not, you must study SDGs, yes, master. No, you must study SDGs, yes, master. No, we asked the students, or they asked the students what they can do. So they discussed this with a lot of people in the university. They went to the cafeteria and they created an initiative. They called it the Table for Two. Now, it's very cute. They discussed this with professors, where it's an initiative where 20 cents per meal becomes a donation to children living in nations like Ethiopia, Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania, and the Philippines. So the meal itself also aims at being healthy and nutritious, but also other students became aware of the SDGs and different goals, like, for example, that are in relation to this, like the SDGs like 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 15, and 17, all are involved in this. So obviously, I would be, interested in incorporating this in my university as well, but I don't know if anybody's listening, but we have too much red tape and bureaucracy, unfortunately. So, but if I say this right now, maybe this will change things, hopefully, in my home institution. Anyway, what I wanted to say was, what is important, that this is a student initiative. It's not, yes, master, think about the SDGs, yes, master, but it's a student-to-student empathy of what the SDGs should be, and it's properly, fostering the youth, not enforcing or not making it mandatory, but more of a voluntary initiative. One thing, if I have, one thing that I haven't been able to share is that Japan is one of the few nations that have received students during this COVID crisis, and we haven't seen our freshmen in person ever so far. So, like, there are a lot of things that we can probably share. I don't know if this is the time, but, like, but anyway, so those are the answers that I had for questions 1 and 2. Questions 2, the example of coming out from our seminar, and question 1 sort of echoing a lot of what's been going on in the sessions up until now. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Muneo, Kaigo, for these examples. There are many questions that came up in the chat. and it will unfortunately not be possible to identify them all. But what I see as an overarching set of topics is the first one. Is there, people ask for recipes. Is there a recipe to teach the SDGs? The second one is, well, is there a possibility for students to be changed, to become change agents if the staff is not ready? So how to ensure that staff is ready, or what are capacity building exercises or opportunities for staff as well to get on board and to actually allow the students to become the change agents that they're all the time being asked to become. Then there was a good question that I would also like you to address, and that is the issue of the link between all the various tasks that are already on the list of universities and the link to internationalization. Do you see those as contradictory, or do you see them as actually complementary? And that would be, I would be very much tempted to answer in part, but I will not. I will give you the floor because I think these aspects are very important. And the last point, to make it even more complex to respond to this, but still, was the question on these global goals are so global. How is it possible, or how do you see that they can be localized better? So if I can turn back to you, you've seen the questions in part, and please, Chandrika, could you start and try and engage with these questions? You have, unfortunately, only 2 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you. These are great questions, and thank you to my co-panelists for giving such rich food for thought. Let me start by saying, we at the Academy are part of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. We have about 1,200 universities, and many of these questions are what we talk about on a daily basis with our university partners. I think these are common questions for all universities that are trying to make sense of the SDGs. In terms of, is there a recipe to teach the goals? I really do seriously believe there isn't one recipe. That's also the theme of this panel, and it's the absolutely appropriate theme. I think there are principles which have been talked about during the discussion today. The first element of this is to try, I think, to really link what is already being taught to what the goals represent, and to find what are the points where are the gaps and where are the overlaps. That's kind of, I would say, the starting point for any program or any faculty of study. The second part that I think is crucial is actually what was asked right at the end, which is localizing the goal. I think there's relatively little relevance in teaching broad global concepts around the world in the same way. I mean, there's some marginal benefit of everyone having in terms of its appeal. Where the SDGs really have meat and where they can make a huge difference is, how does this apply in my community, in my context, and in my setting? And I think if those are the two starting points that faculty begin with, and universities are open to start with, then we can start looking at reformulations in many different ways. I think, Joanna talked a lot about some of those techniques and tools that can be used. We've seen, especially since COVID has happened, the explosion of webinars as a way for students to talk to people outside of their settings to try and get some answers. There are many others. So I think there are many tools, but these would be the starting points. These are also starting points for students to lead. And that's where also we've seen a wonderful, I would say, collaboration between faculty and students. We have, many of you would be familiar with SDSN Youth, which is our student-led leaders who really began by coming to us, banding together and coming to us and telling us we want to start SDSN Youth and we want to advocate for the SDGs. It wasn't something the SDSN staff had planned for. It was entirely student-led. And to me, that's a great example of young people supporting one another, problem solving, taking advice when needed, but frankly, very little is really needed. I think young people have such an incredible dynamism and an ability to persuade their own faculty, their own administration to do things differently. And that's really where I see it happening. I don't believe that every university should aim at internationalization. I don't think that's necessarily a valid objective under all circumstances. I do think spreading awareness and integration of the issues that the SDGs, the challenges that they throw up in the context of the countries and the regions and the communities where the universities are is much more critical. So let me stop there.
Thank you very much. I will now revert the order a little, and I will give the floor to Muneo Kaigo first. And you would have 2.5 minutes to respond, because we also want enough time for the second part of this session. And we may have a little bit more time at the end to come back for each of you. So Muneo?
Okay, all right, thank you. I was thinking about the formula. There are a lot of things that you know, the for example, better curriculum, better professionals, long-term visions, frameworks, and maybe like somehow create a prototype on like how to improve awareness. But I think the major transformation would probably be like a sort of like a change, a way of like changing how of beliefs, or like maybe strengthening communication, you know, within schools is sort of like a lot of the probably elements that are necessary for this. One thing that came up in our seminars that might resonate with you, or they might be offensive, but we were sort of like, you know, discussing this in a seminar. It was a presentation in a seminar, and the thing that remained with me is that the SDGs, it's not about the badge that you put on your chest. It's not fashion, or it's not sort of like some sort of mandatory thing that is being imposed on you, or being told, oh, these are the SDGs, oh, we're already doing this, or the SDGs, oh, that's us. That's not the mentality that we have to have. It's just, okay, so like, you know, okay, so these are the SDGs, we need to understand this, is the mentality. It's a change in culture, it's a change in beliefs, and that's although we all belong in different areas of the world, I think, or different, you know, cultures or different societies, that's, I think, one of the key essential, you know, things that we need to understand. It's just not about the colorful, you know, even right here, the background. It's not about this badge. It's more about what these mean. Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe I've offended a lot of people on this, but that's something that's sort of like, you know, stuck in my mind, and maybe something that I should share right now.
Yeah, no, very important. This shift from something in itself, rather a philosophy. Can I give you the floor, Joanna, and also for 2.5 minutes, so that we give enough time for the second.
Yeah, I think I want to start by saying that you know, we're living through a pandemic at the moment, and we're living through a sharp intake of breath and shock for a whole generation at school all the way through to postdocs. You know, their education has been in some cases stopped altogether, otherwise disrupted, and their horizons have been changed in the sense of what they were looking forward to doing might have had to stop abruptly. And that, I think, is a very, very sharp reminder of the fact that the road to 2030 is, as Chandrika said, 10 years to go. But it's also a sharp reminder for me that it is a very shiny thing, that the SDG way that it's marketed and presented and promoted, to the point that's just been made by the previous panelists. No, it's not all shiny colours and wrappers. On the other hand, it's actually a very attractive way of producing a kind of wrapper around what universities need to do in any case to attract people to very important messages, if you like, I think. And conversely, on the other side, to people who say, well, I would say that it is the only intergovernmental agreement that we have that has actually specifically measured outcomes that need to happen in order to tackle huge issues of inequality and climate and other emergencies that will stop us from having normal lives in the future, just as we've been reminded of during this pandemic. So that's how I would start. I would say, is there a recipe? No, there isn't one recipe, as we've said. At the same time, there is knowledge sharing. The whole point of networks is that actually universities can share best practice. They can share what does and doesn't work with their student bodies. They can share how, for example, co-created content works to an extent when students get really involved, particularly if students, which is many of the case, students are ahead of staff in terms of technology and accessing material and energy. Well, let the students lead in some cases in that. Applied research and research that might not bring in advancement from the traditional academic route. Okay, I'm going to wrap up. And the kind of research that does actually address real life problems. So there are examples from our universities. For example, there's a university in India, Amrita, who have their students living in rural communities where they're credit-bearing courses. And that's actually a really good example of applied research in action. But there's also the problem that someone, for example, in a university that I won't name, talked about how her research was impinged because she was being pressurized to only do research that would appear in high-ranking journals, when actually if she did the kind of work she could do with rural communities, which might produce less, can't think of the word, but would be less perhaps academically focused and more practically focused. So just finally, the final point is that universities have to address the way that they promote their staff and support their staff and student volunteering activities if they want to promote a recipe for SDGs to be embedded across the whole institution.
Yeah. So thank you very much. I see it is far too difficult to condense everything and also respond to the beautiful question. Thank you for the questions and answer. But it is very important to now listen to another set of examples from the University of the West Indies. Certainly also listen to the International Council for Adult Education, because the lifelong learning perspective and the education out of the formal education sector is very important to listen to. And also the initiative from the UNODC to look at how other UN organizations also enter the field, let's say, by offering support to engaging with the SDGs. So I give the floor to Florencia Librizzi, head of program and partnerships at the SDG Academy of the UN SDSN. So Florencia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Hilary, and the remarkable panelists that we've just heard from. I think you give us a great food for thought and set the stage in terms of some of the challenges and opportunities that we need to ensure that we tackle with the right collaboration and partnerships. So I'm delighted to moderate this session, and I believe that by now we know well that in order to advance the SDGs, we can only do it through strong global and local partnerships and collaboration across all sectors of society, and that we really need to be all for one and one for all. Also, we know that we need to build trust and relationships across all sectors, and the SDGs really bring us that vision and that help us to gather the right principles and values in order to build this more inclusive, sustainable, and just world that we all want to create for everyone, not leaving anyone behind. So we heard a lot of things about some of the challenges, the opportunities, the need of co-create content together, what are, identified, what are the gaps and the overlaps, and how we can localize content, and as well as to ensure that we bring together interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary into our content, while we're making it also accessible for everyone. So I would love now to pose these next two questions to our great speakers that we have today. So we hear a bit of what are the roles that cooperation and partnership play for the global agenda. These are our speakers, and also what are the challenges and what opportunities can we build the future on. So I will now like to turn it on to our first speaker, Sir Hilary Beckalus, is Vice Chancellor at the University of West Indies. Over to you, Hilary. You're muted.
There you go. I think that's better. Thank you. Well, it's a tremendous honor to be a part of this conversation today. Very important indeed. And speaking on behalf of my university, University of the West Indies and the Caribbean, to say that we have been at the center of these conversations for many decades. And we have accumulated a and engage in teaching at all levels, from the undergraduate to the graduate level, and we have been a part of international participation. The value of this approach, however, integrating the SDGs, is that it allows, in my thinking, it allows universities to become activist universities, to rise into the space of advocacy, of intersectoral engagement, of stakeholder participation, and it gives the university a remarkable tool, a discursive tool, in which it is enabled to spread its agenda across the entire development discourse. I share the view that the way in which the goals were rolled out presented university to be much more than themselves, and to recapture the traditional philosophy that universities are not, or the finest universities, are not here to serve themselves, but to serve their communities locally and globally in the search for high levels of spiritual, material, and social development and transformation. And therefore, the university now, arguably for the first time, the university sector is positioned and empowered to participate in all of these important global agendas that are necessary to improve humanity's future. My own university takes this matter, I should say, beyond seriousness. Remember that in the Caribbean, because of our history, the climate change goal, for example, climate smart action. Climate change poses an existential threat to the Caribbean space. We are a community of hundreds of islands. Because of rising sea levels, we can actually map the diminishing size of our islands. We are based in a zone of the world that operates with tourism as a primary economic sector. We are suffering, therefore, beach erosion. There are many beautiful beaches in the Caribbean that have been part of the economic and social ecosystem that have disappeared. So we are witnessing the disappearance of beaches that have been a part of. It's having a tremendous impact on the ecosystem in respect of coral reefs, the beautiful coral reefs of the Caribbean. And it's adversely affecting the fishing industry and the marine life of it. So when we participate, for example, in climate change discourses, this is at once a responsibility of the university, that is the custodian of the science, and how to take that science into the world of teaching, and how to use that science as the basis of public advocacy, calling for global support, stakeholder support, and building a framework. So the SDGs really, therefore, have been very empowering to us as a critical part of the higher education network and system. So we have become very activists, and we were appreciative of the fact that the International Association of Universities had identified us, the University of the West Indies, because of over 40 years of cutting-edge research and advocacy as a university that should put together a cluster of global partners to provide the advocacy around climate change and advocacy. We took this responsibility very seriously, and 4 years ago, the University of the West Indies partnered with the State University of New York, SUNY, to create a joint institute to provide for teaching and learning. So now we have the SUNY University of the West Indies Institute for the teaching and research around leadership for sustainable development based upon our tradition of advocacy around these matters. So that is a quick, I think, snapshot of where we are and what we have been doing. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Hilary. I think this is a great example of how you can take the leadership and really convene the main stakeholders and advocate for very important causes for your community and beyond. And I love to take this forward and also continue this discussion with you. But now we would love to hear from our next speaker, from Carol Hunde, and she's Vice President at ICAE, which is the International Council for Adult Education. Carol, over to you.
Thank you very much, Florencia. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. My internet is very poor. Okay.
We can hear well.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about SDG in West Africa. You know that in 2015, all the international community were very enthusiastic for the adoption of SDG. Unfortunately, concrete actions for the implementation of SDG did not start quickly. This is the reason why ICAE and its partners have taken initiative so that all components of the society are made aware of the SDG and taking an active part in its achievements. We used a lot of non-formal learning opportunities. In 2019, for example, we trained many facilitators at the national level that came from Mali, Ghana, Burkina Faso, Guinea, Gambia, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. All of them are lifelong learning facilitators. So that training enabled them to understand the challenges linked to the 2030 agenda and to contextualize the global goals. These training sessions were carried out by consultants. After that, national facilitators thematize and disseminate the acquired knowledge in the form of teaching units that have been practiced in lifelong learning centers. For example, teaching units have been conceived in national languages on hygiene, family health, droughts, deforestation, family schooling. You know that the resources are scarce, therefore, cooperation and partnership are crucial for the achievement of SDG. All the segments of the society must actively participate in their implementation. This is the reason why in our region, we have involved mayors, community radios, state agents, consultants, academics, in all of our training sessions. Local radios are very much listening in the communities, and they manage to achieve impacts on scene. In Sierra Leone, for example, our partner network organized a radio's name is Kiss FM. Debates are held under the radio, and listeners can call to ask questions about the SDG being debated. Each week, they focus on one SDG, and people can ask questions about the implementation and how they can involve. Partnership with mayor is also essential because they are responsible for the local development, and they are closer to the community and their problems. But on the field, unfortunately, they are not very involved. So this is a bit of what we are doing to put partnership and cooperation in place to the achievement of SDG in West Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carl. You're also posing very clearly the need of really community activities and how you're supporting each other and building together this agenda, and which goes very much related to the points of our previous speakers about whether it's creating content or galvanizing the community and how we can solve the real world problems that we have at hand. So I would now like to hear from our third speaker, which is Bianca Kopp from the Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice Officer Education for Justice Initiative at the United Nations Office on Drug and Crime. Over to you, Bianca.
Hello, and a warm welcome also from here, from Vienna. Good afternoon, good morning to all. Florencia, thank you so much for introducing me. Again, I work for the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and I'm very honored to be part of this panel. I could not agree with what the other panelists have said more. Cooperation and partnership are crucial. And I think I have been invited to today's session to share a little bit what we, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, have done with partners, and how we have managed to change our approach by strengthening strategic partnerships and by working with higher education institutions around the world. In order to do that, let me quickly tell you a little bit about the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. So our mission statement is to make the world safer from drugs, crime, and terrorism. So it all relates to the SDG 16, rule of law, strong human rights. And the traditional approach has been to work with national counterparts, to work with law enforcement, to work with judges, with prosecutors, to really strengthen national capacities on the ground, to strengthen the rule of law, SDG 16 worldwide. But we have realized already a few years ago that what we are doing is good, missing, and that we need to change our approach in order to really strengthen the prevention side of our work. So back in 2015, actually before the SDG, the 2030 agenda was adopted, we had a discussion with our member states, and they empowered us to broaden our approach. So no longer follow only the traditional approach, but starting opening up to work with education. Really, for the first time in 2015, acknowledging the role that educators have and that education have with regard to rule of law, with regard to crime prevention. And this was a change maker for us. So we basically launched end of 2015, early 2016, the Education for Justice initiative. And then we were puzzled because of course we were experts in crime prevention, we were experts, or we are experts in rule of law, but we are not experts in education. So how can we adopt a new approach without being the experts? And the question or the answer to this was very simple: by partnering institutions around the world. And this is what we have done right from the beginning of the project. We've consulted with thousands of academics, with educators. What do we actually need to do to strengthen teaching on SDG 16 related topics, such as corruption, such as organized crime, such as human rights, crime prevention? And we have come up with this Education for Justice initiative together with our partners, and we're focusing on 3 different levels: primary level, secondary level, and the tertiary level. And today I want to share with you the experience that we had with regard to higher education. So at higher education, we discussed with hundreds of academics, what can we do to support you, the educators, the experts in education, to strengthen rule of law related teaching, SDG 16 related teaching at your universities. And there was a huge discussion going on. We had several meetings also with hundreds of academics worldwide, and we agreed to jointly develop peer-reviewed material developed by academics for academics on issues related to SDG 16 so that they are empowered to teach more on SDG 16 related topics. So this is the first pillar. We started developing this material. We have more than 5,000 pages peer-reviewed material online. Again, material for lecturers, not for the students, for lecturers, really acknowledging this core and important role that universities have in empowering the next generation of leaders, the next generation of policymakers. So really to strengthen SDG 16 teaching at the university level. And then we realized that's not enough. There's so much knowledge out there, there's so much information out there. We need to basically link these experts. We need to start sharing lessons learned, because it doesn't make sense that we all of us reinvent the wheel. So we have come up with more than 100 of expert group meetings, workshops for academics from different regions, where they can share with each other how is it to teach on, let's say, corruption. We are organizing these workshops together with partner universities. We're inviting different academics to really share how it is, let's say, to teach on corruption in some regions of the world, or how is it to teach on organized crime. And this is how we basically have created this network of educators, like-minded educators that really want to empower the next generation to become active with regard to SDG 16, advancing the SDGs. But again, that's nice, but we also realized we are still missing a part of the puzzle. And the last remaining part, and our third pillar, what we are focusing on, is basically the need to strengthen academia's voice. Why? Because we continue, all of us, to work in silos. We have the academics in one silo, we have the United Nations often in one silo, and the policymakers in their own national bubbles. Hosting academic conferences together with partner universities, where we basically bring these different stakeholders together, where we basically, academics share the latest research, policymakers listen, and vice versa, to really come up and to strengthen this bridging that needs to be done. And we would not have managed to do all of this without our partners. And the International Association of Universities was one of our key strategic partners, also to reassess whom do we need, whom do we need to reach, who is active with regard to the SDG 16 cluster. And thus I cannot just re-emphasize, without collaboration, without cooperation between these different stakeholders, we will not advance the SDGs. And I think this is why our UN Secretary General has launched a Decade for Action. Don't forget, he has highlighted in January, again, the need to come up with innovative partnerships. Look at, I mean, there's a competition of funding. We know now with the pandemic that the member states, our countries, they will cut the funding for education, but also for the United Nations. So I think by linking partners, we can also make more of the funding that we have. That was it from my side. Thank you.
Much, Bianca. Thank you so much to the three speakers. I think we heard different roles and different ways in which collaboration and partnership can help us to really move the needle together, right? Whether it's helping to lead and convene these groups, bringing experts together and share best practices and knowledge and experience and challenges, as also as well through community activities that they are regular, that empower and help to bring kind of a bottom-up emergence of good practices and really these reflections of how we move forward. There are a lot of questions coming and also thoughts. I think one interesting aspect here is one question about there's a lot of talking around some new social movements and also how they're really fast-paced and they're demanding that change happens and happens soon. So how do you feel this relates to the idea of partnerships and also moving these subjects forwards and advancing fast enough? I don't know if maybe we can start with Hilary, then Carol and Bianca, and I will pose other questions as well. You're muted. We can't hear yet. You're yeah, wonderful. Now we can.
It mutes itself. Yes, the concept of partnership and of collaboration, I think, is the key to all of this. I wish to emphasize that universities ought to become very activist if they wish to participate in these goals, certainly at the level of advocacy, research, teaching and learning. And it is an invitation to pull ourselves from our tradition of inward-looking scholarship, inward-looking research. This is an opportunity to say global development discourse is the top agenda of this century, how to lift all of humanity. And we, as the university sector, we have been called upon to provide leadership. We have been called upon by virtue of our specific location to generate advocacy and to transition our research from our faculties into the public space where the impact can be absolutely enormous. I believe that this is an opportunity to legitimize the university, because therefore should see this responsibility and take it very, very seriously. I mean, there was certainly a prior moment, I think, at the end of the 20th century, where there was doubt about the value added of the university. There was concern as to whether universities were absorbing so much resource and not giving back enough. I think this is an opportunity to answer those kinds of questions and to secure the future of the university for the next 30, 40 years by demonstrating its capacity to solve specific national and global challenges. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Hilary. I totally concur with what you're saying, and the purpose of the university is huge, but we need to show it, and it has to be about solution-oriented, addressing our issues. So, Carol, over to you now. What would you like?
I totally agree with my colleague about what he said, but I think I would like to add the fact that we should think globally but act locally. So we as ICAE, we undertake advocacy at global level, but we have also the responsibility to contextualize this advocacy work at the community level, because we need all the actors of the society to achieve the SDG. If we just stay at global level, we cannot achieve the objectives. So that's why at our level, we are very focused on the communities, and we sensitize them, we train them, and we inform them about the issue at the global level, and we also involve them to think for themselves on what could they bring for the achievement of the 2030 agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol. I totally agree with you. And Bianca, what's your take on this?
Yes, I fully agree with what both the previous speakers have said, so it's not that much to add on. But you have asked about how do we accelerate the change, and I think we have a few really good examples how important it is to really focus on the next generation and to empower the next generation to come up with a change. I mean, yes, we can initiate it, but we need to teach the next generation, because without them, the change will not happen. And we have seen that can be a lot of pressure from the bottom to the top, as we have seen with the Fridays for Future. So I think there are a lot of creativity out there, but we need to empower them by quality education. And we have a couple of really good initiatives ongoing under the Education for Justice initiative that we really have seen that change comes when we kickstart it together with the next generation.
Absolutely, thank you so much. I also see some questions about resources, and we're going to share, all of the resources of the different panelists, also the SDG Academy. There's some guides on implementation on the SDGs and many more. But also, since we have just 5 minutes before I turn it on to Katarina, I just want, we're talking about change and partnerships and collaboration, and we've been talking about youth, and it's so important in terms of change that we bring the voice of young people, also the different sectors of societies and minorities, and we've been hearing a lot about equity lately, which is wonderful to hear. So just in 1 minute, what would be the message of each of the speakers? And we close or the thought that you want to leave with them in terms of how they can leverage collaboration, partnership, and really help deliver this change that we sorely need. Bianca, maybe we can reverse. We can start with Bianca, then Carol, and then Hilary.
Thank you. Become active. I think that's my main message, because, and I think Carol has said it already, the SDGs, it's our joint responsibility. It's not the responsibility of member states. It's not the responsibility of United Nations alone. It's our joint responsibility. So the youth need to become active. That's my message.
Thank you, Bianca. Carol, over to you.
We need to strengthen the partnership and continue to work together in one voice, but with our diverse idea in order to help each of us to be informed. We don't need, but we should follow the engagement taken by our leaders. You know, in my country, for example, I didn't know what is going on about SDG, but I discovered all those things that they are realized on the voluntary national reports. This is not normal. As civil society actors, we should involve fully in that process so that we can raise our voice and make concrete suggestions for the achievement of SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hilary, over to you.
Thank you so much. The concept of global citizenship, which has taken responsibility for planet Earth, a tremendous amount of investment in youth advocacy and consciousness raising. I'm very comfortable that this process has started. We are seeing this globally in the Black Lives Matters movement, where young people are saying, the world that we live in, we want to see more justice, we want to see equality for all, we want to see a better standard of social engagement. So the process has well commenced, and it is for us in the university sector to continue to promote and to empower young people to have their voice heard and to allow them to speak on all of these matters affecting humanity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we have heard loud and clearly from our speakers, you know, and we need to be active, we need to own the process and be responsible global citizens, and ensure that we are really empower our communities, and we're community driven and thoughtful in that sense as well. I like to thank very much our speakers for their thoughts and their reflections. And a reminder to everyone that you can listen to this afterwards if you want to take notes of additional thoughts, and we're going to circulate some of the resources that, as we said, we have produced, each of us, in collaboration with experts from around the world and with partners, because that's the way that we can actually move the needle forward. So it's my pleasure now to pass it the floor to Katarina Popovic, Secretary General of ICAE. Katarina, over to you. And thanks so much, everyone, again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor and the opportunity to speak at the end of such a rich session. There were so many inspiring contributions and so many good things to hear and to share. So I'll try to add a few things, try not to repeat too much because most important things can be said, but maybe highlighting a few aspects that could complete the picture of the role of education and learning in the SDG process. So first, I would like to say that, you know, somehow it's a natural partnership between education and learning, training, and the SDG process, especially when it comes to university. Now, I would even dare to say, well, university were using the logic of SDGs and were thinking and working in this logic even before the SDGs were created. I mean, we are talking about education as a standalone goal. And of course, universities and education, they're playing an important role in that. But we were also talking about the contribution of universities and lifelong learning to the achievement of other goals. So that's doing many years ago. So we started many years ago. So somehow it's the logic that is very much known to us, and we are glad to see more of this intersectoral approach to SDGs because we can easily contribute to that. And the great is also that this session was great also because we saw several great examples of how education can really play this important role in linking the global goals and local practices, and not only education as activity, but also as education as it's taught at the universities. How it can help to translate the local goals to the concrete actions, and how it helps to contextualize the global goals. And this is one of, as we know, the biggest challenges of the SDGs. And the next big challenge is, that's what we have heard in the last week, first week of HLPF, we are not on track. The decade of action was education contribute. We have heard two sets of examples and comments, one on the non-formal education and lifelong learning and the other on university. So I would comment on both of them. So let me start with non-formal education and adult education and lifelong learning. And I think the COVID, unfortunately, helped us to see additionally why it is very much needed, why we cannot stick only to the formal institution and the education of children and youth. Of course, we don't deny this is the most important, the investment for the future, but at the same time, the planet cannot wait, the people cannot wait, and of course the SDGs, I mean 2030 is just around the corner. So we have to act fast. We have to have adult education, lifelong learning, otherwise we will not be able to achieve them. So adult education, lifelong learning, they have this capacity of acting fast, being work in the context and to reach the people that are usually difficult to reach via formal education. I mean, the example of Carol was really great. It helped us really to see how even some of the traditional methods of adult education can help. For example, using radio. We also heard about some examples in our ICAE network, some examples of using good old traditional face-to-face method and people going from door to door, sharing the information about the COVID, about the behavior, needed changes of behavior, about how to protect yourself and your family from the virus and so on. So adult education was able to react very fast to the situation to help people without waiting for the formal system, which is, as we know, quite big and not so easy to adapt to new challenges. But at the same time, and I think sometimes it's even more important than providing people with knowledge and skills and information content. It was also about, very much about developing critical thinking, making people aware of the challenges of the new situation. Some of them were related to the civic education, to the human rights and democracy. We saw this very strong tendency to cut off the human rights, and democratic processes being jeopardized in many countries around the globe. So we needed this adult education, non-formal and informal adult education and learning in order to teach people about their rights, about the importance of some democratic processes they go on, although it's crisis, or how do they go on during the crisis. And it turned out to be also very important after the crisis to re-establish the society, some order, but not going back to the old normal, because the old normal wasn't normal. There was too much of injustice, inequality, and education, adult education. And as I said, I'm afraid that COVID crisis provided us some additional arguments why we cannot wait until crisis happens to act and to start working in adult education, but we need to support it even before that. And another very important aspect is, of course, universities, and there were a lot of great examples, and I was really glad, and I learned a lot from the speakers. And I want to add one aspect that maybe wasn't underlined enough. And I believe Chandrika was saying about this tension between normative character of SDGs and the need of universities to explore, to be free, to be open-minded. So how do we deal with that? What do we do? So I see the role of universities and higher education when it comes to teaching SDGs, of course, but also other areas, not only to provide but knowledge and information, but also to go broader, to go behind, or to go deeper. And I will again go back to COVID crisis and as an example of why is it needed. There is, I will use a sentence or a poem that was quoted recently quite a lot. We are all in the same boat, where we are all in the same boat, but we are not in the same storm. And some are in the, some people's ship might be, boats might be shipwrecked, and the others might, you know, have a really nice yacht and be not so much harmed by the crisis. We are not in the same storm, and the crisis did not hit us at the same level. So for some people, COVID crisis was a moment to reflect, to reconnect, to spend time with the family, to do the gardening. For others, facing loneliness or not being able to follow some of the rules like social distances and so on because of the bad situation in terms of housing or food supply and so on. So I think the task of the universities when it comes to the SDG on being it education or health or urban living and cities and so on, is to go beyond the crisis and to explore the roots of what's going on and the roots, systemic and structural failures that have a consequence, the fact that the crisis was really disaster for someone and for the others just a moment of break and thinking and reconnecting and so on. So what are the deep structural causes and what are the failures of the global governance, of the global finance architecture that cause such a disaster consequence? So of course, education is helping, and universities are helping in teaching SDGs in this way also, usually, but especially when in the context of crisis, I think we have to draw some lessons from the crisis. This is going to deeper to the root causes of the problems and to the structural and systemic issues that education and university have to explore. Of course, the difficulty is also that universities have to be free in exploring that. They have to be open-minded and critical. And we know that there is a pressure in the university. There is a kind of a neoliberal pressure that university have to perform. They have to have, you know, all these numeric quantitative indicators and performances and so on. They are very often, or more than they used to be, grants driven and projects driven, and time and space and energy to reflect on the structural problems that that becomes so dramatic when it comes to the crisis. But I believe that's exactly the role. This is such an important role, and that's the role that we cannot give up in the current moment. When it comes to the SDGs and why we are lagging behind, this is one of the tasks we have to face. Who, if not universities, will help thinking or rethinking SDGs? So it's not only about delivering or implementing the SDGs, but also rethinking them. And that's the moment, because we know HLPF review has started and Decade of Action is there. So we need to be more engaged in the failures and why we are not on track and what else should be done. So rethinking the whole SDG process, say rethinking the paradigms behind. I don't think universities and researchers have been engaged enough in the creation of SDGs and the creation of the monitoring system, because it's obsessed with the quantitative paradigm. And we are now facing the consequences. But still, let's not give up, because it's the moment of rethinking and going back and suggest some new solutions for the time coming. So, and maybe a few more smaller points. I, of course, cannot not reflect on the digital, because we are now in the Zoom, and I'm delighted, and this is one of the positive lessons learned. At the same time, I also have to remind all of us, half of the world is not online. This is one point. So how do we, in education and training, how do we reach the other half? And I'm afraid that COVID made it even worse. And additionally, as researchers also, university or people from education professionals, we have to ask ourselves, what are the things that are left behind in this digital obsession, I would even say, that COVID caused? Can we teach critical thinking? Can we teach intercultural, global awareness, global mindset? It was mentioned in a few questions. So what are the limits, and how do we reach other very important education goals, also equity and justice and so on? How can we teach it also in the digital world, but also beyond the digital world? I think those are all important questions that we have to ask, and we have to contribute to their answers in both non-formal education and in universities. Thank you.
So thank you very much, partners. I think the floor is equally important for all the different partners here around the table and all the speakers. I would like to maybe in the few minutes that are left to ask the speakers to maybe react to your wonderful summary, but also to your presentation, because you went way beyond, which was very welcome, because you touched on very essential points that could enhance the conversation here. So in the sequencing on my screen, maybe I give just one quick reaction to all, and please stick to the time. We really have 3 minutes, then we wrap up. So Muneo, in maybe one sentence, what would you like to add? Then I go to Bianca, Carol, Joanna, Chandrika.
Okay. Regarding what Katarina talked about COVID, I think with everywhere else. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca.
Thank you, and thank you, Katarina, for this inspiring summary and way forward. One sentence on the digital gap. Fully agree, we only reach half, and we need the partners to reach the other ones. Example, we are at the moment working with universities in Africa to develop radio lectures. We ourselves would not have come up with the idea, it was our partners. And I think this is a good example that to overcome the digital gap, we need to work with partners.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you very much. And Katarina summarized very nicely all our discussion. I would like to underline the fact that more than ever, we should work together in order to achieve the 2030 agenda, to leave behind our competition for funding and come together for innovative plans and action for our community and for a better life worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna, and then Chandrika.
Two things very quickly. Firstly, digital divide. On the one hand, we've never seen universities react more quickly and more innovatively to this. And we're doing a project with 20 East African universities of blended learning that happened before COVID that actually has fantastic lessons about co-creating content and creating a much more even playing field. On the other hand, the digital divide shows that actually you might have all these wonderful schemes, but until we actually fix that, we're not going to create that even playing field. And yet creating a digital equity is not unsolvable. In fact, it's probably one of the more easier solvable problems. And that's what we, I think, as Three Networks will be focusing on. And just finally, I just wanted to thank Katarina highlighting the problematic phase of the, there is no one size fits all, and the autonomy of our institutions is really important to democracy and to democratization of knowledge. So thank you for that.
Chandrika.
Thank you, Katerina, for a wonderful summary and presentation. I think what really resonated with me was, of course, the aspect of the digital divide, because we face it on a daily basis in our work, but more broadly, your point about inequality and how COVID has affected different parts of the world and different people in very different ways. And it brings me back to, I think, the Secretary General's call of building back better. And I think that's where universities have a fundamental role, because the question there is how do we build back better? And that's where, as centers of knowledge and learning, universities can really lead the way in a way that just hasn't happened before at this scale. So that's really where I think the opportunity lies, and we can come out of to put their minds to this problem.
I'm sorry that Sir Hilary Beckalus had probably to move to another and attend to other meetings as well, but I'm convinced that he would have very much appreciated the summing up, Katarina, and also for the you're back, so I give you the floor.
Yes, thank you. This is something that
Sir Hilary Beckalus is back, Katarina, so if we give him the floor quickly to react, that would be really nice. Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry, but I was here, just I took an opportunity to have a cup of coffee.
Oh, but, that's nice.
The summary has been excellent, and I wish to thank you all for this. I wish to thank all of my colleague speakers and all of the organizers for this engagement. I think we are much more focused, and I think if we continue to build upon this kind of narrative, it will certainly help the university sector to be clearer in its thinking as it shapes advocacy and activism. So thank you so very much.
Yes, wonderful. I will just give you the last word, Katarina, together with Florencia, but I think that we already see a big development since last year, HLPF 2019, now 2020. Let's continue the good work, and all together. Thank you very much for this very nice cooperation. Thanks to all the speakers for your wonderful contributions. And this is only, again, on our way to better, and together we will make it. So Katarina or Florencia or together.
Yes. Okay. So very short, because I'm aware of the time. I put in chat box and I would like to share it here. So transformative learning is what we need in the SDG process. We are not only delivering, we are rethinking the SDGs. Business as usual will not help. Education as usual will not help. So new transformative ways of learning is what we need. And I believe education, both formal and non-formal, is the one to help, to be really a creative partner with a vision that could help us to achieve that. Thanks.
Thank you so much. To thank everyone, and really resonates with what I was thinking. And I think the final message for me is let's make sure that we do it now and together. Thank you so much.
The time is up, so we thank you, and we will be back in other fora. Thank you. Have a good day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.